All right, so let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel that is UPSC Geek by NRG. Today, in this lecture number 31, we are basically going to continue with J.S.Mill that we have started in our previous lecture, that is lecture number 30. So before starting lecture number 31, let me just take you through lecture number 30 and ensure that we revise and also remember and recollect the things we have done in the previous lecture. So in the previous lecture, we have basically started with the introduction, that was basically the life and time of Mill. We have seen some of his major works, basically, and we have seen his magnum opus like on liberty, utilitarianism, and women's suffrage. This was some of his major works. Then we have seen one of the major regard of Mill, that if there is anyone who is liberal, it is J.S. Mill. We have seen why it is regarded, why Mill is regarded as one of the greatest liberal, and also he is regarded as one of the most inconsistent thinker, because we realized that he stood at the crossroad between several transition, like transition from laissez-faire to an active role for the state, right? So just to give you a basic brief about his life, as we know that J.S. Mill was somewhere standing at the crux point of different transition. J.S. Mill के जो टीचर्स थे वो बैंथम थे, वो इनके डैड थे जेम्स मिल, जो इनके लाइफ में बहुत बड़े इन्फ्लुएंस थे. दे वेयर ऑल वेयर द फिलोसोफर ऑफ व्हाट द अर्ली लिबरल era, right, which was a kind of transition from the medieval time. And as because of his influence and his reading of Plato and all the idol scholars like Aristotle, Plato, and etc., they also somewhere had an influence on Mill, right? So as Mill was greatly taught by the liberal philosophers like Bentham, James Mill, and etc., he were also hugely indebted to the ideal school that were Plato and Aristotle, right? So he were kind of standing on the crossroad between transition from several ideology like laissez-faire to an active role of state and etc., right? And because of that, we realized that Mill was a consistent thinker. We have seen the reason that he was standing at the crossroad. That's why he got his idea from those particular points or the crux point, which were basically the transition from a particular ideology to different ideology, like the laissez-faire to positive state, negative state to positive state. So this made or shaped the James Mill ideology of his liberal idea. We have seen one MCQ to check your progress, and the question was J.S. Mill was not a, right, he was for sure a champion of democracy, he was for sure champion of women's right, he was also for sure an utilitarian, because he revived the idea revived the idea of utilitarian, which was by his teacher, that was Bentham, and he given his own idea on utilitarianism. Okay, but he cannot be regarded as a socialist, because he was the someone who was hugely criticized by socialists, that we will be seeing in today's lecture. All right, so this was the first question, and the second question was basically who is regarded as father of liberalism. You guys might have guessed it right, it is none other than the John Locke himself. Okay, and Mill was also influenced by Locke to propound his idea on liberalism, right? Bentham and etc. can be considered as liberalism, but Locke is someone who is considered as father of liberalism. All right, so this was all about the lecture number 30. If you guys haven't watched the one, go and sincerely watch that particular lecture, because it will help you build your basic pedestal very strong, so that you can construct your further premise of understanding on the stronger pedestal. All right, so with this, let's get started. So before starting people, एक चीज मैं आप सबसे कहना चाहता हूँ कि keep revising continuously, keep revision. Okay, keep doing revision, because it becomes very important. As we all know that prelims is very fast approaching, prelims is just at the worst now. The date is 26th of May 2024, but the PSIR becomes very important. Why? Because later on you will not be having time to entirely do it from very beginning, right? So here it becomes very important to take out some time and at least give an hour for PSIR, so that you can have that crisp, very crisp note, and you can just go through the note before the mains examination and get a mains ready, right? And this is the strategy of 2O and 2E, which can decide your selection in the UPSC examination, right? What are the 2O? 2O are basically the two optional papers, and 2E are basically essay and ethics, right? People usually neglect these areas, but these are the areas which can optimize very efficiently, right? This, if you will see, will constitute of around 1,000 marks, and if you just give half of the time to these things, right, you will get easily this 1,000 marks, because these four are very scoring paper, right? And hence it becomes very important to also keep track of 2E and 2Os, right? So with this, let's get started with today's lecture. And today we will be seeing the Bentham and Mill idea on utilitarianism. Why Bentham comes into the picture? So Bentham was the teacher, okay, teacher of Mill, right? Who was Bentham? Bentham was basically the Jeremy Bentham, right? He was basically the teacher of Mill. How Benthams come into the picture? Because Bentham was the friend of James Mill. Bentham was the friend of whom? James Mill. And who was James Mill? As I have already told you, he was the father of J.S.Mill, right? The thinker which we are seeing right now. So he was James Mill, he was the J.S. Mill, and his father was basically the James Mill, who was friend of Bentham. And Bentham were the stronger propounder of the idea of utilitarianism, that we will just see what was Bentham's idea of utilitarianism, right? So this is how Bentham had an influence on J.S. Mill and his ideology on utilitarianism, right? So more than as a part of political science, it is a concept of ethics. Utilitarianism is very useful concept in ethics and also shapes the ethical perspective of J.S. Mill, and that also directly influences his idea of political ideology like liberty, right? Liberty on women rights and suffrage, right? This is what influenced the Mill's idea on liberty and suffrage, right? So let's get started and see what is utilitarianism in its true sense. What is Bentham's utilitarianism? We will see what was the criticism or what was the side effect or the drawbacks of Bentham's utilitarianism, which led Mill to revise the idea of Bentham's utilitarianism and propound his own idea of utilitarianism, right? So this will be the major agenda for today's lecture, okay? So utilitarianism has been the dominant philosophy in Britain, okay? So why it was the dominant philosophy in Britain? It had wide appeal among the common man. It had a wide appeal among the common man. Hence it is known as philosophy of common man. Why it is known as the philosophy of common man? Because common man may not have the ability to understand the grand philosophical notion, and hence the utilitarian philosophy, which is based on the simple concept of pleasure and pain, has an appeal among the common man. Now I am going to tell you the story behind all this. We have seen the concept, right? Now we are going to see the story, right? So basically, what is utilitarianism? Utilitarianism is an ethical idea which says that men act as per the principle of pleasure, and pain, right? Men act as per the principle of pleasure and pain. This is the idea, right? Now let's see what is the story behind this idea. So utilitarianism is an idea during the Industrial Revolution in Britain, right? During the 17th to 18th, early 18th century. during the industrial revolution, right? Who were the majority of the people during industrial revolution? It was basically the labor class, right? It was basically the working class who were dominant population during the industrial revolution. And as belonging to the working class, as belonging to the labor class, they did not have the understanding or the philosophical understanding, right? They do not have the philosophical understanding. Why? Because they were mainly concerned about their sustenance, right? Their sustenance. What is sustenance? The bread for 2 times, right? Their food for 2 times. They were majorly concerned about their food for the time and not about ethics and philosophy, right? And hence it became very very difficult for the people or for the ideologues of that time to explain them, right? How to behave or how to act in a society, right? Because they were engaging in whatever act they like, so as to ensure that they get the food for the 2 times, right? उस टाइम का फिलॉसफी ऐसा था, जो वर्किंग क्लास या लेबर क्लास थे वहां पे, उनका मेन कंसर्न था सिर्फ 2 वक्त का खाना, 2 वक्त का फूड, राइट? एंड दे वेयर इंगेजिंग इन वॉट एवर दे कैन टू गेट दिस फूड, राइट? तो वहाँ के जो आइडियोलॉग क्लास थे, जो वहाँ के फिलोसोफर क्लास थे, लाइक बेंथम एंड एक्सेट्रा, they have started formulating an idea, right? They have started formulating an ethical norm, right? Ethical norm in order to regulate the ethical acts of this particular class, right? And this is the class which is being referred as a common man here, right? Common man may not have ability to understand the grand philosophical notion, and hence the utilitarian philosophy, which is based on the simple concept of pleasure and pain, has an appeal among the common man, right? So what is the idea here is that the philosopher propounded the idea that the common man or the labor class, they basically work on the principle of pleasure and pain, right? Two piece, pleasure and pain. People will do whatever gives them pleasure, and people will not do or avoid doing something which gives them pain, right? This is the basic idea behind the utilitarianism or the ethical concept of utilitarianism. That people basically work on the principle of hedonism. What is hedonism? Basically the pleasure and pain. People will do whatever gives them pleasure, and people will not do whatever gives them gives them pain. So this was the basic idea behind the utilitarianism, which was given by whom? The Bentham idea. And this is why it was very very prominent or prevalent ideology during the 18th and 19th century Britain, right? So according to utilitarian ethics, man should do what gives him pleasure, right? Man should do what gives him pleasure and should avoid what gives him pain. Right and wrong depends on what gives you pleasure and pain, right? So this was the idea, or this was the situation which was prevalent during the IR during the 18th and 19th century in Britain. All right, so this was the entire idea, right? And as you see, the notion of imperialism or colonialism, right, all these are the outcome of the utilitarian concept, right? Utilitarian uh, ideology which was prevalent in Britain, right? people started chasing people started chasing resources. Why? Because it gives them pleasure, right? And hence later on we will realize that the Bentham's concept of utilitarianism is merely a economical concept based on maximization of profit, right? He said that chase or do whatever gives you pleasure, and hence people taken this thing very seriously, that they started chasing things which given them a real sensual pleasure at the cost of greater benefit of the people. And this is why Bentham's concept of utilitarianism also came under major criticism, right? So this is the premise which I have given. Now we are going to see the entirety of Bentham's concept in detail, and we will also see what were the loopholes or drawbacks was there in Bentham's concept of utilitarianism, utilitarianism, which led to Mill devise his own concept of utilitarianism. All right, now let's see salient feature of utilitarianism by Bentham. Okay, so as we know that utilitarianism is prior to Bentham. The idea that people usually do whatever gives them more pleasure is something which was already been talked about by even by the social contractual schools like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, right? And even people contemporary and even prior to them as well. But Bentham was the first person to make utilitarianism as the systematic school of thought. Bentham was someone who did an intensive study on utilitarianism, and he devised the idea based on the ethical principle that people do whatever gives them pleasure and avoid whatever gives them pain, right? He devised his own calculus known as philosophic calculus to count or to measure the amount of happiness or pleasure which is being experienced by the people as well. That is why Bentham was someone who is considered to have done systematic study on the school of utilitarianism. All right. So hence utilitarianism became synonymous to Benthamism. Why? Right? Why? Because Bentham was being correlated or being regarded as an propounder of utilitarianism, right? The 18th and 19th century utilitarianism in Britain was the very much marketed or branded by Bentham, right? His idea got viral in today's sense, and hence people started knowing the term utilitarianism by Benthamism, right? In today's context, as we know the idea of non-violence or truth by Gandhiism, right? Likewise, the idea of utilitarianism at that time became famous by Benthamism. The salient feature of utilitarianism given by Bentham are, let's see some of the salient feature which was devised by Bentham. Principle of utility, right? So basically, Bentham devised his idea of utilitarianism on the principle of utility. What is the principle of utility? Principle of utility is nothing but the idea that men work under the sovereign master of pleasure and pain, right? Bentham himself quoted the idea that nature has placed man under the governance of two sovereign masters, that is pleasure and pain. Not only we do what they dictate, but we ought to do that way. So the idea is we do not get regulated by the sovereign master of pleasure and pain, but we are made as that. We are made like that. We are by nature that, right? Human beings are by nature hedonistic individuals, right? He given the term of physiological hedonism, physiological hedonism, physiological hedonism, right? What is physiological hedonism? His concept of utility is equivalent to physiological hedonism, that we tend to do something which gives us pleasure, which gives us sensual pleasure, more bodily pleasure. This is the principle of utility which is being given by Bentham, and he has quoted that nature has placed man under two sovereign masters. And what are the two sovereign masters? It is basically pleasure and pain. Why pleasure and pain is considered as two sovereign masters here? Because they regulate our actions. Pleasure and pain are the two sovereign masters which regulate our actions. They decide what human beings ought to do, how they should behave, how they should act, right? So this is the principle of utility which is being devised by Bentham. The second feature, the salient feature, is pleasure is just quantitative term, quality is not important, right? So what does this mean? It basically means when we talk about pleasure, one can be pleasure, right? one can be pleasure and other can be happiness, right? What is pleasure? Pleasure is basically more bodily sensual pleasure. It is more bodily sensual pleasure. But what is happiness? Happiness is very refined pleasure. It is very soulful pleasure, or we can say that it is a idea of bliss. It is an eternal concept. It is eternal concept. It is very materialistic concept, right? It is very materialistic concept. But here, like, just we have made a difference between pleasure and happiness, right? But Bentham says that pleasure is just a quantitative term, quality does not important, right? The less or more, the quality does not matter. If you are liking something, you are liking that in entirety. And if you are not liking something, you are not at all liking that. It is not like I am liking it 20%, I am liking it 80%. No, no, I am hating it 100%. It is not like that, right? It is not like I am liking eating pizzas 100%, but I am liking eating burger only 60%. It is not like that. Here Bentham is saying that if you are liking something, if you are liking pizza, like it 100%. It is not like you are liking pizza 100% and you are liking burger only 60%. If you are liking it 60%, that means you are not liking at all, right? So here he is saying that pleasure is not, it's just a quantitative term. Quality is not important. It means there is more pleasure or less pleasure. More pleasure in the case of pizza, that you are liking it 100%, or less pleasure or no pleasure in the case of burger, right? So he's saying that Pushpin is as good as poetry. So in case of pizza and burger analogy, burger is as good as pizza. If it is not the case, then you are not liking the burger at all. If we have to count the pleasure, it should be like, yes, I like both pizza and burger equally, that is 100%. It is, you cannot say in front of Bentham that I like pizza, that is 100%, and I like burger only 60%. No, he is saying that Pushpin is as good as poetry. What does this mean? Pushpin is a game, right? Pushpin is a game. But as we know that Britain is a country of poetry, right? Literature. There the position of literature is higher than most of the other things, right? So here the Pushpin, that is game, is saying that it is as good as literature or poetry. This is the idea, that there is no difference in the quality. Either you are liking literature and Pushpin on equal terms, or you are not liking it at all, right? So Pushpin is as good as poetry. Thus there is no difference in pleasure and happiness as per Bentham, right? The difference we have just seen, that pleasure is more bodily, more sensual, more limited, and happiness is more eternal, more soulful, more blissful, and etc. The revised version of utilitarian by Mill will based on this idea, or this difference between pleasure and happiness. He will say, though people behave, or people act as per utility, or on the principle of hedonism, or on the principle of pleasure and pain, they are more inclined towards happiness, right? This is the revised idea by Mill. But here Bentham is rejecting this idea, and this is the basis which will be built by Mill in order to give his revised edition of utilitarianism, right? So here is the one loophole. Here is the one loophole that we are just seeing right now, right? Though it is a salient feature of Bentham's utilitarianism, it will become one loophole for J.S.Mill that we are going to see in later course of slide. Okay, so here he is making no difference between pleasure and happiness, right? Pleasure is just a quantitative term, quality is not important. But for Mill, it will become a defect, it will become a loophole, and hence he will revise the idea and he will give his own idea. Okay, so pleasure is a materialistic or materialistic in origin, right? Why materialistic in origin? Again, go back to IR, that is Industrial Revolution time, right? And people were mainly driven by the materialistic gains, right? If they gain something, it accrued them pleasure. If they lost something, it gave them pain, right? So this was the idea. It was very much materialistic in origin. What does this term materialistic means? Basically the materialistic gains or profit maximization, right? So if something led to profit maximization or materialistic gain, it gave them pleasure. If that was not the case, then it gave them pain, right? So this was the idea. What was the fourth salient feature? Pleasure is understood on the basis of experience rather than sacrifice, right? Experience. Why? Experience is always about gaining. We gain experience, right? And this is how it is based on very much what materialistic principle, right? Because it always talks about gain. If we are gaining something even in the form of experience, that is giving us pleasure rather than sacrifice, right? Sometimes what happens, even we sacrifice for the good of the people, it gives us happiness, right? It gives us happiness. Why? Because our sacrifice will lead to the benefit of the people or the public at large, right? But when we talk about Bentham, his idea of pleasure is on the basis of experience, that is the gain, and not on the basis of sacrifice, that is our individual sacrifice for the sake of general welfare or for the sake of greatest happiness of greatest number, right? So this is the idea. The fifth feature is he even devised a formula to measure the pleasure known as felicific calculation. Okay, so what was his idea of felicific calculation? As in the previous slide we have seen that his idea of pleasure was not something which was differing in quality. If you like something, you like it completely. If you dislike something, you disliked it completely. There is not like you are liking it midway or halfway or in balance, right? It was not in the case of Bentham what he have divided, right? So if you like something, it will be counted as 1, and if you dislike something, it will be counted as 0, right? And when, let's say, there is a state policy or state program, right? So the basic referendum was conducted, and people out to ask there that whether did you like this particular policy or not. आपको ये particular government की policy अच्छी लगी या नहीं? In India's term, if I have to take an example, let's take the example of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, right? So how, in terms of Bentham, the success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan will be decided, right? So let's say there are 10 people in our country, in our India, right? Just an hypothesis, just an assumption. Imagine, right? Just open your imagination and just imagine there are only 10 people in India, right? This all 10 people are summoned by the Honorable Prime Minister, right? And all these 10 people are asked कि हमने जो स्वच्छ भारत अभियान लॉन्च किया था, आपको क्या लगता है वो सक्सेसफुल है या नहीं, राइट? अगर एक इंसान को लगता है कि हाँ ये सक्सेसफुल है, आई एम हैप्पी क्योंकि मेरा घर साफ हो गया था, जब स्वच्छ भारत अभियान वाज गोइंग ऑन, माय होम वाज क्लीन एंड आई अग्री दैट इट इज सक्सेसफुल, दैट थिंग विल बी काउंटेड एज 1, राइट? The other person, let's say the person B says that I saw the house of C was cleaned but my house was not cleaned or my area was not clean, so I am not convinced that it was successful, so it will be regarded as 0, right? Likewise, either it will be 1 or it will be 0, either it will be 1 or 0, right? And hence if it will get the majority of vote like 6 or 7 or more than half, it will be considered as success program, and if this does not get a majority of vote, it will be regarded as failure, right? So this is what the Bentham idea of felicific calculation was, right? So he said that the pleasure can be calculated on a arithmetic terms, right? So this was the idea of felicific calculation. Again, Mill will consider this as a false or loophole, and again he will update or revise his idea. He says that pleasure is not something quantitative but it is a qualitative. It cannot be calculated because it is something of experience, and whatever I am experiencing, how can I give it a number, right? How can I say that I am experiencing something, let's say on the scale of 1 to 10, I am experiencing something 7. How can you say that? Right? You cannot label something just on the mere numbers. That is why on this basis Mill will criticize his idea and he will give his revised edition of utilitarianism. Right? So let's see next salient feature. Not only pleasure do not differ in quality, he says that even persons also do not differ in quality. Right? As we have already seen that he said the idea that pleasure do not differ in quality. Right? There is no concept like pleasure and happiness. For him both are the same. And he is also saying that not only the pleasure do not differ in quality, but also persons do not differ in quality. What does this mean? When he says that person also do not differ in quality, he basically gives this idea on the basis that everyone, all people are driven by the idea of pleasure and pain, right? Whether someone is rich or poor or good or bad, irrespective of their condition and situation, everyone are driven by the sense of physiological hedonism, that is pleasure and pain, and hence even persons do not differ in quality, right? Because everyone are driven by the same idea of pleasure and pain, right? So this is the basic idea when he says that not only pleasure but also persons do not differ in quality, right? So I'm hoping that you guys are like getting the concept. If you guys are getting the concept, just slightly move your finger and hit the like button. Okay, hit the like button. That will give me a immense positivity and love from all of you. All right, so let's see the next salient feature. So here Bentham also suggested the yardstick for the action of the state, right? Action of the state in the sense that he said, as we have seen his formula of specific calculation, right? So let's say if government is planning to come out with a policy, let's say if government is planning to come out to start something, to start a policy, right? So Bentham is basically devising or giving a yardstick to government that if you are planning to start something, go and ask to the people, right? And if they agree, if the vote or if the calculus is higher, right? If the votes are higher that people are liking it, then you should go ahead with it, because if people are liking it, it will give rise to greatest happiness of the greatest number, right? What is greatest happiness of the greatest number? Basically, if people will like it, if people are happy about any policy, they will give more votes to any policy, right? And if they are getting more votes, it will always be equivalent that it is the greatest happiness of greater number, right? And if this is the case, then the government or state should go ahead with that particular policy, and it will ensure the greatest happiness of greatest number. So this is the yardstick. Okay, this is the yardstick which can even be used in ethics as well, right? So the ethical principle of utilitarianism is basically based on this very basic notion of greatest happiness of greatest number, right? So this utilitarianism or consequence is also one of the determinant, right? What is the determinant of ethics? Determinant of the ethics is basically the ground, right? The ground which decides whether any action was ethical or not. The rightness or wrongness of an action is being decided by the determinants, that is utilitarianism. So if any action of government policy is leading to greater happiness of greater number, it will be an ethical action, right? So let's say you are an administrator. If you are an administrator and you have to act as per your discretion, right? Because not everything has a law and regulation. Sometimes an administrator also has to use his discretion, right? So how will you know whether the discretion or will out of which you are taking a decision will be appropriate or not, right? So here you can take this as an yardstick, right? How will you take the decision? Here? The decision can be based on whether my decision will lead to the greatest happiness of greatest number or not. So this is the yardstick Bentham is proposing to the administrators, to the government officials, and etc., that before taking any decision, before taking any action, just think, just try to measure the decision on the basis that whether it will lead to the greatest happiness of greatest number or not, right? So let's see this particular part of greatest happiness of greatest number in a little bit more detail, right? So for Bentham, happiness and pleasure is same, as we have already seen that he makes no difference between quality of pleasure, right? He makes no difference between quality of pleasure. For him, there is no difference between happiness and pleasure. Pleasure implies profit, right? Here for Bentham, pleasure implies profit. Why or how? Again, go back to the time of IR. People were mainly driven by the materialistic gains, the profits. All right. So Bentham supports that economic policy which gives maximum profit. So economic policy which gives them maximum profit is something which is pleasurable action. According to Bentham, if state does not intervene in economy, right? State does not intervene in economy, it gives rise to maximization of profit, right? Again, here also Bentham is talking about negative concept of state, right? Negative state. Why? Because he is not advising state to interfere in the economy. Why he is not advising state to interfere in economy? Because if state does not interfere in the economy, it will lead to the maximization of profit. It will lead to the maximization of profit. That is why he is not advising state to interfere in the economy. What is this particular idea is called as? In economy, this is basically called as the idea of laissez-faire, right? Laissez-faire, or the idea of free market economy, where the ideologues propound the idea that in order to ensure the efficient working of market, the state should not intervene in the economy, right? But again, one very genuine question might come: if state will not intervene in the market economy, will it not lead to the ill sides of the market, like poverty, like wealth inequality, like exploitation? These are very genuine questions, right? So Bentham is basically advising to the state that no, state should not intervene in the state, because if state will not intervene, it will lead to the general development, the growth, and hence maximization of profit, right? He suggested state intervention in economy on behalf of poor to provide them social security may not be desired policy, right? So the very genuine question might come: if this will be the case, won't it lead to the ill effects like poverty, wealth inequality, exploitation of resources, exploitation of powers, right? Where the big fishes will end up eating the smaller one. Won't be this case. What does Bentham is answering here? How Bentham is approaching to those sort of issues, right? So this scholar support laissez-faire policy, as I have already told you. Bentham believed that the state policy should promote economic growth, right? Here Bentham believed that state policy, or the aim of state, is always to promote economic growth, right? So what is the idea Bentham is giving? That it is not necessary for the state to interfere for the promotion of economic growth. Why? Because if state will not interfere, what will happen? The profit maximization will happen, right? Profit maximization will happen if there is no state. And how this profit maximization will ensure economic growth? Through trickle down effect. What is trickle down effect? Trickle down effect is basically like the trickling of tap water, right? As we have seen in the tap, how water trickles, right? How water trickles drop by drop, and it affects the other part of the area as well, right? You will see grass prospering and etc. Likewise, here Bentham is saying that if one individual maximizes his profits, maximizes his profit, he will end up employing people, right? If he will end up employing people, hence employment will increase, right? If one people have to increase his profit, he have to employ people for work from him, for work for him, for work for his firm, right? So as to he will ensure the maximization of profit. He cannot do all by himself, hence he have to employ, right? Once he will employ, people will also earn. People will also earn. If people will earn, they will also spend, right? Once they start in spending, the people who are engaged in other firms and market will also earn, right? Once they earn, they will also employ, and this is how the cycle will continue, and this is how the trickle down effect will eradicate the ill issues like poverty, wealth inequality, exploitation, and etc., right? So this is the answer which is being given by Bentham for the genuine question that won't the non-intervention or non-interference of the state will lead to the uh, issues like wealth inequality, poverty, and etc. He is saying that no, he is saying big no. Why? Because due to trickle down effect, it will ensure the proper and just distribution of wealth in the entire state, right? So this is the idea of greatest happiness of greatest number, which is being given by Bentham. Now let's see criticism of Bentham's utilitarianism, right? Though his justification is right, but still his idea of utilitarianism is being brought under the purview of criticism. Now let's see what are the criticism. Utilitarianism was once very popular, but gradually the criticism started. Okay, criticism started, and utilitarianism has been criticized as pig's philosophy, right? People like Carlyle, they started criticizing utilitarianism as a pig's philosophy. Why they have started criticizing utilitarianism as the pig's philosophy? Because utilitarianism simply emphasized on satisfaction of appetite, right? Satisfaction of appetite. What is appetite? Appetite is basically the materialistic gains, right? So the Bentham's idea of utilitarianism basically emphasized on the materialistic gains and not on the other issues. Hence utilitarianism degrades men to the label of pig, right? Why pig? Pig is not just a pig, but they have tried to symbolize pig with animals, right? Animals, how animals are only concerned about their basic instincts, right? Basic instincts of food, procreation, sustenance, and etc., right? And hence the Bentham's idea of utilitarianism, or his idea of principle of utility, is also based on the satisfaction of appetite, and hence critics are basically criticizing the Bentham's idea, which basically degrades the man to the label of animals, because he only talks about the satisfaction of appetite and no other things, like satisfaction of reason, satisfaction or happiness that we gain through our services, right? He do not take consideration all those extraneous happiness or sources of happiness. This is why his concept of utilitarianism is brought under the criticism that it is a mere pig's philosophy or animalist philosophy. The pig is just concerned about the satisfaction of appetite, no concern with quality, right? Utilitarianism becomes the basis for justification of extreme exploitation of the workers by the capitalists, right? As he have um, propounded the idea of what? Propounded the idea of no a negative state conception of market economy, or simply laissez-faire economy, right? Where there is a no state to regulate the capitalist so as to promote the capitalist exploitation of workers. So the critics are saying that the Bentham's utilitarianism is mere justification for exploitation by capitalists of worker class. This is nothing else, because when capitalists will start maximizing their profits in the absence of state, it will lead to nothing but a mere exploitation of workers, right? when I say mere exploitation of workers, what does this mean? It basically means that they will end up regulating their own wage rates, right? Own wage rates, right? What if the wage rate is too low even to ensure the normal spending of sustenance by workers? ऐसा भी तो हो सकता है, अगर स्टेट ना हो तो जो कैपिटलिस्ट क्लास है वो वेजेस अपने हिसाब से रेगुलेट करें एंड वो वेज इतनी कम हो कि वो अपने नॉर्मल सस्टेनेंस दैट इज फूड के बियॉन्ड कुछ स्पेंड ही ना कर पाए। अगर वो केस होगा तो जो बैंथम ने ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट के बारे में बात किया था जिससे पूरी इकोनॉमी को ग्रोथ मिलेगी, वो कैसा पॉसिबल हो पाएगा? Because if they will only end up purchase the food items, what will be the other people who are engaged in different or the diverse economic or market activity? How will they survive? Right? To make this example more relevant, just take the case during the pandemic, during the COVID, right? People were locked down inside the homes. People were only spending their savings on food and grocery items. Hence, FMCG, that was fast moving consumer good, okay, the FMCG was the only sector which was FMCG, and agriculture was the only sector which was booming, and all the other sectors were in recession. All the other sectors were in recession. This is the case, right? So if the workers during his time will only spend on food and the sustenance items, then how the others area of market economy will grow? How it will lead to the trickle down effect that Bentham is talking about? This is something which needs to be thought upon, right? And this is where the critics are criticizing the Bentham's idea of utilitarianism, okay, that it is mere justification for the extreme exploitation of the workers by the capitalist. Since profit is a source of pleasure, there is nothing wrong if person is going for his pleasure. Okay, so here he is saying that since profit is a source of pleasure, there is nothing wrong if a person is going for his pleasure, even at the cost of huge distress to others. Pleasure and pain actually means profit and loss, right? So he is saying that if the pleasure is the only goal for the human beings, they are not concerned about the others or the distress of the others, right? Let's say if I am wanting to open an industry, a mining industry, right, near the area or locality where a group of people are staying, right? If I start a mining near to a proximity to this area where the people are staying, what it will lead to? It will lead to air pollution, right? It will lead to water pollution. It will lead to the degradation of environment around that particular area. It will lead to the deterioration in health of the people who are residing in this particular area, right? But being utilitarian in nature, I will not be concerned about the distress which is being caused by the people living or residing in this particular area. Why? Because I will only be concerned about my profits, right? So this was what was the situation during his time. People were so much concerned about the pleasure that they were ended up neglecting the distress which was being outcome, right? People, the working class, were used to, or they used to live in a single apartment in very congested manner. People ended up having lot of chronic diseases like asthma and etc. due to that congestion in Britain, right? So this is what the critics are criticizing Bentham's concept of utilitarianism, right? That if the pleasure was the only concern of the humans, it came with the concept, with the cost of distress of the others, right? They have ended up neglecting the distress it caused to others, right? So as per the critics, the Bentham's concept of utilitarianism was sheer or basically the profit and loss and nothing else. People were basically doing if something given them profit, and people were doing if something given, people were not doing something which give them loss. right? So this is a materialistic notion of utilitarianism of Bentham, right? Hence it is being criticized as what? Pick's philosophy. So Mill considered Bentham as his master, so he thought it is his duty to defend utilitarianism and Benthamism, right? Now here Mill is coming into picture, right? Which Mill? The Sun Mill, like the J.S.Mill, right? Here the J.S.Mill is coming in the picture. He venerated Bentham as his teacher. He regarded Bentham as his teacher. And though being a student of Bentham, his idea, the Bentham idea of utilitarianism, was hugely criticized by the critic, right? Hence, being a student, it will be my sole duty to defend my teacher. This is what J.S. Mill thought, right? And hence he entered into this arena and started defending utilitarianism or Benthamism. But how he did that? However, once he tried to defend utilitarianism, he ended up destroying the very fundamentals of utilitarianism, right? When he started defending utilitarianism by giving his own concept of utilitarianism, he completely destroyed the very fundamental notion of utilitarianism, right? And that is why Mill is also called as Peter who denied his master, a Peter who defied his master. बोलते हैं ना वो स्टूडेंट, यूजुअली टीचर्स ही बच्चों को बोलते हैं कि तुमने ऐसा काम किया जिसने मेरी नाक कट दी, तुमने मेरी नाक कटा दी, तुमने मेरे पूरे मेहनत पे पानी फेर दिया. So this is what Bentham might have said to Peter or his Mill, J.S. Mill, that Peter, you have defied your master, you have defamed your master, right? Why? Because he have just in order to defend, आपसे कुछ हो नहीं रहा है तो आप रहने दो. But what J.S. Mill did is, it is very humorous, and whoever will teach you will bring this particular humoristic notion, right? Because just to defend his master, he ended up destroying the basic concept of utilitarianism itself, right? So let's see how he did that, right? Why or how he distorted the very fundamental notion of utilitarianism. Okay, because if he is influenced by Bentham, he was also influenced by Greek thinkers like Plato and Socrates, right? As we have seen, just in the age of 10, he had mastered many of the works of Plato and all the Greek authors, right? So he was also hugely influenced by Greek authors like Plato and Socrates, which also gave him more idealistic approach, right? More idealistic approach. At the one side, there was Bentham with more liberal utilitarian approach, and there was on the other side Plato and Socrates with more idealistic approach. And if you see, these are the two extremes of the spectrum. They are the two extreme of the line, right? If on the one hand Bentham talks about individual materialistic gains, here the idealist will always promote society. They will talk about the state than one individual, right? Because for them state is individual writ large. State is more important than individual, right? Here they are the two extremes of the spectrum, right? And hence he tried to reform utilitarianism by bringing the concept of idealism. So what he did was that he tried mixing up the utilitarianism with idealism, right? Basically he tried mixing up utilitarianism with idealism in the sense that he tried devising a little bit positive idea of utilitarianism, right? As according to critics, it is very negative idea. Bentham utilitarianism is very negative idea. Why? Because it is regarded as Pick's philosophy, very animalist in nature, right? But idealist on the other hand is very positive, very idealist in nature, right? What Mill did, he tried to amalgamate or mix those both ideas. He said that though pleasure matters, but pleasure is also qualitative in nature, where pleasure is of two types, right? We will see how he tried to propound this idea of utilitarianism in very progressive manner in the next lecture. But today, just have the idea that he tried reforming the idea of utilitarianism by bringing the concept of idealism. Okay, hence ultimately he destroys utilitarianism, right? But again, this 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 term which says that he destroys utilitarianism is very negative, right? What he is destroying here is that he is destroying the notion, right? Notion of utilitarianism which was held by the people in Britain, right, during the 18th and 19th century, right? Basically, people of his time had the notion that utilitarianism is very negative concept. People, in the sense, the critics per se, right? The critics who said that utilitarianism is very kind of fixed philosophy. They very genuinely had a negative notion about utilitarianism, right? But there came a Mill to defend his master, that was Bentham, and said that no, whatever you are thinking is wrong. Utilitarianism is not about the individual, it can also be seen otherwise, where one can devise his sense of happiness, pleasure by doing the or by promoting the idea of greatest happiness of greatest number, by promoting the idea of general welfare, right? General welfare, by promoting the idea of welfare of the people than mere individual, right? And this is something which will be undertaken by Mill in order to defend the concept of utilitarianism and give his own revised version of utilitarianism, which is more positive notion than mere physiological hedonism, which was being given by his master, that is Bentham, right? So it is just for humor that Peter defied his master, but in the sense, Peter is someone who what who yielded more respect to the concept of utilitarianism by his master, that is Bentham. And with this is for today, guys. I am hoping that you guys are striving each day and also liking the lecture. If you guys are liking it, please ensure to like the video and also subscribe to our channel, that is UPSC Geek by NRG. If you guys have any question, please make sure to post that in the comment, and also ensure to join our Telegram community, that is UPSC Geek by NRG, to have any discussion if you have in your brain, and also share the answer that will be given through the questions that I will be posting either in the community or through the lectures itself, the practice questions, right? I will evaluate them and also give you all a valuable feedback so as to maximize your potential in order to ensure better performance in the exam. With this, all the very best, and thank you.